Wow, we have some really profound material. We're diving into excerpts from two pretty significant books.
Right. These compile research on near-death experiences, NDEs. The books are Unveiling the Afterlife and Unveiled, the Greatest Discovery in Human History, Proof that We Are Immortal.
And these aren't just collections of stories. The authors are making a pretty bold case, aren't they?
They really are. They argue that after looking at thousands of NDEs spanning over 50 years, the consistency is so striking that these reports reveal fundamental truths about consciousness, about reality itself. Truths they believe should basically be accepted as fact now.
Because the patterns are so consistent across cultures, ages, beliefs, even non-believers.
Precisely. That's the core of their argument for why this offers compelling evidence about existence beyond, the purely physical.
Okay, so for this deep dive, for you listening, we're zoning in on one specific and, let's be honest, potentially controversial chapter from this body of work.
The chapter titled Sin.
Exactly. We want to explore what these NDE reports, as analyzed in these sources, seem to suggest about this really fundamental religious concept.
And how that picture compares to what people apparently experienced during the life review, which is such a common element in NDEs.
And the sources themselves state pretty clearly, what people report about sin during NDEs is often, well, surprising. It can directly challenge a lot of traditional religious views.
It really can. It sets up a potential clash between established doctrine and reported direct experience.
So, consider this a journey of discovery. We're sticking strictly to the material provided, looking at what these NDE accounts might tell us about a concept that's shaped so much of human history and belief.
Let's dive in. Where do we start?
Start by setting the stage. What's the foundational picture these NDE reports paint, according to the sources, particularly about the divine, the creator figure?
Okay. Well, the sources describe the creator figure reported by NDErs in a way that, right off the bat, challenges some conventional ideas.
How so?
This creator isn't depicted primarily as a judge or distant ruler. Instead, the reports consistently describe a being who apparently created humans with just incredible talents and capabilities.
Impressive talents. Like what?
Things like immense creativity, deep capacity for understanding, profound connection, the ability to love, to be loved unconditionally, potential for incredible growth. It's like we're endowed with divine sparks, capable of amazing things.
Okay, so a very positive view of human potential from the get-go.
Very much so. And crucially, these reports consistently emphasize that this creator also gave humans something absolutely fundamental.
Free will.
Exactly. Free will. The ability to choose, to decide our own path, to use all those amazing talent in countless ways. It's presented as a core gift, the mechanism for navigating our existence.
Right. And how does this creator, according to the NDE reports in these sources, react to how we use that free will, the choices we make?
Well, this is where it diverges sharply from many traditional views. The consistent message reported is not one of judgment or condemnation based on our choices.
No judgment.
No. Instead, the experiences are choices, actions, outcomes, both the good and the difficult ones, are apparently seen and utilized as lessons for the soul.
Lessons.
They're presented as integral to the soul's journey of learning and growth. Every single experience, every decision seems to hold value for expanded consciousness, for deepening understanding. Nothing is wasted, so to speak.
Okay, now that leads to a really interesting point the sources make, doesn't it? About the concept of sin itself.
It does. It's a profound implication drawn directly from these consistent NDE accounts. If you have this creator described as unconditionally loving, who designed us with free will specifically for the purpose of learning and growing through experience, then the concept of sin, at least as it's often understood in religions, an offense against God's law deserving punishment, it just couldn't logically exist as part of that creator's intention or nature. It doesn't fit the picture.
Well, it creates a paradox, right? The sources highlight this.
Absolutely. Think about it. Why would this incredibly powerful, loving source give us free will, give us all these capabilities, design us to make choices, and then punish us for using those very capabilities to make choices and learn?
It seems completely contradictory to the reported nature of this divine presence. Illogical, even.
Exactly. It just doesn't compute within the framework described by NDErs. And based on this inherent contradiction and the sheer weight of consistent reports, the sources make a very direct, quite startling claim. They conclude that religion, human religion, as it developed historically, is presented as the actual inventor of the concept of sin.
Wow, okay. They state that directly. Religion invented sin.
They do. They don't shy away from it. They explicitly contrast this human religious invention with the creator consistently described in NDEs.
And that creator.
According to those who report encountering this presence, this creator does not seem to bother about judging mankind for sinning. It's just not part of the equation from that perspective.
So the focus in that spiritual realm, as reported, is elsewhere.
Entirely elsewhere. It's on love, understanding, learning, growth, not on labeling actions as sins and meting out judgment according to some divine rule book.
So the overall pattern emerging from these thousands of NDEs, according to this research, suggests a perspective on sin and judgment that's radically different from any traditional religious views.
Radically different. And that's really the core of what we're exploring for you today, this fundamental split between common religious teachings and what NDErs consistently report experiencing directly.
It definitely reframes the whole conversation about our choices, why we're here, and what accountability looks like.
It shifts it away from punishment toward learning through consequence, cause and effect, really.
Okay. Now, speaking of reframing choices, there's another specific observation the researchers make in the sources that's incredibly telling. It's about the absence of a particular word.
Yes, this is fascinating. The sources call it a profound observation.
And the word is?
Temptation.
Temptation.
Yes. The researchers state that across decades of analyzing thousands upon thousands of NDE accounts, the word temptation is just remarkably absent. NDErs don't use it to describe their lives or choices.
That is significant because in so many moral or religious frameworks, resisting temptation is, well, it's central, isn't it?
Absolutely central. The idea of being tempted by desires, by external forces, towards doing wrong, it's often framed as the core human struggle.
But NDErs, even during their life review, where they see everything, they don't describe their negative choices that way, as giving in to temptation.
Apparently not. They relive their actions, feel the consequences, often intensely. They feel the harm caused. But when they describe why they made those choices, the language isn't about being tempted away from the right path.
So what language do they use? How do they describe those choices we might call wrong or sinful?
The sources detail a few consistent themes in their descriptions. Often it's about choices made from limited understanding.
Meaning they just didn't grasp the full picture at the time.
Exactly. They didn't comprehend the full consequences or implications of what they were doing.
Okay. What else?
Another key description is actions taken out of fear or a sense of separation. This is huge. The negative choices are seen as stemming from an internal state of disconnection, feeling separate from others, from love, from the divine source, rather than being lured by some external tempter.
Interesting. So the source of negativity is internal disconnection, not external temptation.
That's the perspective reported. And also, simply making decisions without full awareness of their impact. The life review grants that awareness, often viscerally, but the original choice lacked it.
This is a really different way of looking at bad choices, isn't it? It's less about malice or weakness in the face of temptation.
And more about limitation, fear, or lack of awareness. And the significance of this absence of temptation language, according to the sources, is profound.
It suggests the spiritual realm views things differently.
It strongly suggests that the spiritual reality encountered by NDErs just doesn't operate on that framework of temptation versus resistance. It's a different paradigm.
And instead of judgment for being tempted,
NDErs consistently report unconditional love and acceptance, total acceptance. They explicitly state they don't feel judged for perceived failings or sins.
so the focus remains on learning.
Completely. Both in their interaction with the divine presence and during the life review, the emphasis is entirely on learning and growth through understanding the consequences of choices, not on passing or failing some test of resisting temptation.
And the sources say understanding actually replaces temptation. How does that work?
Well, the idea presented is that once you see and feel, truly feel, the full impact of a choice.
And the sources point to the sheer variety of religions as evidence of human constructs being layered on top of. Maybe a simpler truth.
Yes, they argue that the diversity and contradictions within world religions show how humans have added concepts, rules, sins, punishments that differ significantly from the consistent message of love and learning reported by NDErs.
The contrast is striking.
Very striking. Religions build complex systems. Sins, laws, rituals, heavens, hells. NDErs report something much simpler and more profound. A reality based on love, learning, and connection. No complex rules, just experiential understanding.
And in this NDE view, even actions we'd call evil or sinful are seen differently.
Yes, they're often reframed, not as transgressions to be punished eternally, but as difficult opportunities for soul growth, opportunities to learn empathy, understand consequences, expand awareness.
Even things that cause great harm.
Even those. The focus remains on the learning derived from the experience and its consequences for everyone involved, rather than on divine condemnation or punishment for the act itself. It's a challenging perspective, for sure.
It certainly explains why NDErs often shift away from rigid religious doctrines afterwards.
Exactly. Their direct experience of unconditional love and learning-focused reality often clashes fundamentally with doctrines emphasizing sin, judgment, and conditional salvation. They move towards a more universal spirituality focused on love, connection, and growth.
Because their experience suggests the human constructs added layers of fear and judgment not present in the core spiritual reality.
That's the conclusion drawn from their consistent reports. These layers, perhaps well-intentioned historically, don't seem to align with the fundamental nature of the reality encountered in NDEs.
And the consistency across different backgrounds, religious, atheist, different cultures, is key here.
It's presented as very strong evidence. Regardless of prior beliefs, the core NDE reports converge. Unconditional love, a life's review focused on understanding, and an absence of judgment for sin. This suggests they're tapping into something fundamental, beyond cultural or religious programming.
Which makes the contrast with the historical development of religion even starker. The sources touch on that history too, right?
They do. They bring in archaeological and anthropological perspectives to trace how human religion likely developed.
And the initial motivation was?
Largely, trying to explain and cope with powerful, unpredictable natural forces. Thunder, floods, disease, death, things that deeply affected survival but were incomprehensible.
So attributing them to unseen powers made sense.
It was a way to understand and potentially influence these forces. If gods control the rain or lightning, maybe you can appease them, gain some control.
And this evolved over time.
From spirits in nature, animism, to multiple gods controlling specific things, polytheism, eventually towards monotheism. But the underlying pattern, the sources suggest,
Yes.
was humans trying to manage powerful, seemingly random events by attributing them to higher powers who needed appeasement. This framework naturally leads to concepts like sin actions that displease the powers and divine punishment, the negative events themselves, and the need for rituals and sacrifice to maintain favor.
It was a system for understanding and attempting to control the uncontrollable aspects of life back then.
A logical framework for its time. But now, contrast that historical development, driven by explaining external phenomena.
With what NDErs report experiencing directly.
It's night and day. Instead of an anthropomorphic God demanding appeasement or punishing based on human-like emotions.
They report pure, unconditional love and understanding, a presence totally unlike the deities seemingly constructed to explain storms or harvests.
And instead of needing complex rules and rituals to avoid divine anger,
they discover simple, profound truths about reality being based on love, learning, and interconnectedness. The need for external appeasement just vanishes.
So the core argument is stark. NDEs reveal a spiritual reality fundamentally different from what human religions gradually constructed, largely out of a need to explain and control the physical world. NDE reality is about consciousness, learning, love not managing external forces, or appeasing temperamental deities.
Which leads to the source's call to action, essentially. They suggest we're at a point where this NDE evidence needs to be taken seriously.
Yes, the phrasing is strong. NDEs are revealing the truth, and humanity now has to accept the evidence and reshape his beliefs.
Reshape beliefs? How? Discard religion entirely?
Not necessarily discard wholesale. The approach suggested is more nuanced. Re-examine existing traditions through the lens of these consistent NDE findings.
I don't see what aligns and what doesn't.
Exactly. Identify the elements within religions, like core teachings on love, compassion, unity, that do resonate with the NDE reality, and perhaps recognize other elements like doctrines of inherited sin, eternal hellfire, specific mediators as historical constructs that might not reflect that core reality.
What are the key truths from NDEs the sources suggest should guide this reshaping?
Several key themes emerge consistently.
Yeah.
First, the absolute primacy of unconditional love over any form of divine judgment.
Okay.
Second, that growth and learning through experience is the fundamental purpose of earthly life, not obeying rules to earn salvation.
Right.
Third, the profound absence of divine punishment or condemnation. Consequences are about learning, not retribution.
Important distinction.
Fourth, The reality of consciousness continuing beyond physical death, challenging materialism. And fifth, the fundamental interconnectedness of all beings, felt directly in the life review.
And these points, they argue, might align with some mystical traditions or original teachings, but clash with later institutional doctrines.
Precisely. It raises the possibility that original spiritual insights about love and unity might have gotten overlaid with human constructs born from fear, the need for social control, or attempts to explain the physical world before science. Sin, as a punishable offense, fits that pattern of a later, perhaps pragmatic construct.
So the future might involve a gradual integration of these NDE insights, a slow reshaping of belief systems.
That seems to be the implication. As awareness of NDEs grows, the questions they raise become harder to ignore. The sources present the sheer consistency across cultures and time as a really compelling basis for re-evaluating these traditional concepts.
Towards something more unified, maybe less fear-based.
Towards a spirituality centered on inherent love, continuous learning, and ultimate acceptance, rather than on sin, judgment, and external salvation.
Okay, so let's try and quickly summarize the major shift this NDE material presents regarding sin.
It's a fundamental move away from sin as divine offense, away from judgment, punishment, fighting evil, resisting temptation.
And powerfully towards a reality grounded in unconditional love, where life is about learning and growth through experience, understanding consequences within an interconnected whole, and where accountability is internal, not imposed externally as punishment for sin.
And the sources present this not just as a theory, but based on the consistency of the evidence as the truth now being revealed.
A challenging perspective, undoubtedly. And just to reiterate, this entire deep dive has been based solely on the source material you provided us.
We've stuck to analyzing the claims and evidence presented in those books.
If this has sparked your interest and you want to go deeper, the source books mentioned are Unveiling the Afterlife and Unveiled: The Greatest Discovery in Human History, Proof that We Are Immortal.
They contain far more detail, many more accounts, and deeper analysis that we could cover here.
Definitely worth exploring if this topic resonates. So as we wrap up, here's that final thought for you to chew on, drawn directly from the material we've discussed.
Go for it.
Based on this NDE evidence presented in the sources, if sin isn't actually a divine concept, but a human construct built over time, what does that really mean? What does it mean for how you understand your own mistakes? For the purpose of your life, for the nature of whatever divine reality might exist?
Yeah, if the fundamental reality is unconditional love and learning, how does that change how you view yourself, how you view others, how you view the challenges you face every day? What really stands out most to you from this exploration?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
Make sure to subscribe.
Right.
Give this video a like.
Okay.
And comment. And importantly, tell your friends.
Subscribe, like, comment, share.